The Wild Robot is an animated sci-fi film based on the book series of the same name by Peter Brown, produced by DreamWorks Animation and distributed by Universal Pictures. The film was written and directed by Chris Sanders, best known for directing Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon. The voice cast includes Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal, Kit Connor, Bill Nye, Stephanie Hsu, Mark Hamill, Catherine O'Hara, Matt Berry, and Ving Rhames. After a shipwreck, an intelligent robot called Roz is stranded on an uninhabited island. To survive the harsh environment, Roz bonds with the island's animals and cares for an orphaned baby goose. This review will be spoiler-free. I thought the trailers looked fairly average for this movie. I think Hollywood has got a real trailer problem at the moment. Many modern trailers are extremely underwhelming. It is almost like they never quite adapted from losing the narration in trailers, as that made it very easy to sell a movie without showing a lot. This film has had great word of mouth though, and so it is on that basis that I saw it. DreamWorks has certainly had a rockier history than a studio like Pixar or Ghibli, but there was a legitimate conversation about a rivalry between Pixar and DreamWorks in the early 2000s. This was due to the early DreamWorks output, films like Shrek 1 and 2, The Prince of Egypt, Madagascar, Kung Fu Panda, and How to Train Your Dragon. They set a great precedent with those films. Whilst The Wild Robot doesn't reach the heights of those films, it is better than much of their recent output. However, recently I loved 2022's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, not only because it had more of an introspective and layered examination of its characters, but the studio utilised a new style of animation, one that incorporates elements that appear like 2D pastel brush strokes enveloping 3D models. It is a great style that sets DreamWorks apart from a modern animation studio like Illumination, for example, whose animation style is fairly pedestrian. The Wild Robot's colour palette isn't quite as striking as what you see in Puss in Boots 2, but due to the island environment, I can forgive that, as the range of colours at that location are generally going to be limited to greens, blues, and browns. The animation is quite impressive for the robot herself, with each individual element moving independently, whether that's a chest plate, waist, wrists, fingers, neck, or head. I do think audiences are overhyping this film quite a bit, as while it does present something respectable, it is hardly fresh and interesting. This film respects its target demographic of children by letting the scenes breathe. The dialogue is minimal and the pace is in a comfortable spot to test the attention span of children, but not to lose it. I understand that I am not the target audience for this film, but that isn't ever an issue for me. I love many animated films, just as I love live action, but despite the genuine effort and competence on display here, I couldn't help but get bored by the trite storyline. Aside from the last 20 minutes, which plays as a sort of fourth act, the film was extremely predictable, and even though the film isn't too long, I was itching to get to the end due to how stereotypical the characters were and how recycled the story and themes were. I do think the messaging here is good for kids, and it is certainly important to support what is largely an original film. Yes, it is based on a book, but it is not a sequel, prequel, remake, or reboot, and that is something to be valued at the moment in terms of mainstream Hollywood cinema. It is certainly something worth getting your kids excited about, but it is truly forgettable and hardly tear-jerking, as many seem to be claiming. The surrogate parent plot is something we have seen done better in animation. The fox is a goofy supporting character, the likes of which we've seen many times over. The dialogue isn't heartfelt, it simply gets the job done. The characters say everything you expect them to say within each scene. Yes, I am being harsh on this film. It isn't a bad film, but an extremely forgettable one. The one thing it does have going for it outside of the animation and the pace is that it is very topical when it comes to artificial intelligence, We have seen deeper movies about AI and robots in the past, but considering where we are currently at with AI in the real world, this feels like a more relevant time to tell this story. They could have easily just told this story with Roz as just an animal instead of a robot, but that would have been a much less interesting choice. An AI as a surrogate mother for a baby animal is ripe for a nuanced examination at the moment. However, the film doesn't deeply explore these themes at all. The themes of whether a robot can feel love or connection with living beings, and what classifies that AI as not a living thing, are touched on just enough for there to be some subtext if you really try your hardest to read it. I wish they'd focused in on that topic a little more though, and in a more blatant and honestly obvious way. It seems like it's something they didn't want to dive too far into, but it makes me wonder, would Pixar have done so? Overall, this is a fairly decent film to take the kids to. DreamWorks continues to utilize a new animation style that sets them apart from other studios and treats their younger demographic with the respect that they deserve by allowing the scenes to play out at the pace they should without dialogue filling every moment of silence. There is a lot of silence in this movie, which is a good thing. If you were interested in this film purely as a film fan rather than a parent, I wouldn't set your expectations too high. That being said, I'm clearly in the minority on this one, as it is getting great reviews from both critics and audiences, and seems to have opened fairly strong at the box office, which is great as it is an original film. I can only express my opinion after all. I try to present my opinion in a diplomatic way rather than a way that is brash and unreasonable. I don't believe my opinion is more valuable than anybody else's. I just love going to the movies and talking about what I've seen. But I have to be honest, this one didn't do anything for me, unfortunately. I wish that it did. It was well crafted on a technical level, but was disappointing from a writing standpoint.